Mom, shall I start, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Shall we start, sir?
Yes, please, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. Vijay, ma'am.
Good evening to one and all present here. I welcome you all for the day 5 session of the 1 week virtual FDP on NAC criteria, marching towards excellence. Prayers outlive the lives of those who uttered them, outlive a generation, outlive an age, outlive a world. Now we will start the session by invoking the blessings of God.
Namo Harihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajayanam, Namo Loisavasahunam, Neso Panchanamokaro, Sarva Papa Panasano, Mangalanam Chesadesim. Padamam Havai Mangalam, Padamam Havai Mangalam.
நீராறும் கடலொடுத்த நிலமடந்த கெழிலொழுகும் சீராறும் வதனமிட திகழ்வரத கண்டல் தெக்கனமும் அதிர் சிறந்த திராவிடனல் திருநாடும் தக்க திரு பிறை நுதலும் தரித்தனரும் திலகமுமே அத்திலக வாசனை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்திசையும் புகழ் மணக்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனங்கே தமிழனங்கே உன் சீரிழமை திறம் வியந்து செயல் மறந்து வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே.
I request Dr. Anita Indu ma'am to deliver the welcome speech.
Thank you, ma'am. It's my immense pleasure to introduce today's chief guest, Shri Hari Ashok Pingal. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Shri Ashok Pingal, he is presently working as Assistant Professor and Coordinator IQSC at Sangmar Nagarpalika Arts, DJ Malpani Commerce and BN Sharda Science College, Sangmar, Maharashtra. He is one of the founder members of IQSC Cluster India. In his short career of 13 years, he has already served as IQSC coordinator of his college for 10 years and vice principal for 2 years. He is the member of governing council of his college under autonomous status. Under his tenure as IQSC coordinator, his college was re-aggregated with A+ grade, a CGP of 3.58 by NAC in third cycle. He is a postgraduate in zoology from Nagpur University and stood first in order of merit. He was a CSIR, JRF, and SRF. With around a dozen publications in peer-reviewed journals, he has also published 15 textbooks. He has completed one minor research project funded by UGC. He played instrumental role in getting star status of his college under DBT Star College Scheme, Government of India. Apart from organizing 7 national and international conferences, he has also organized Inspire Internship Campus twice, which is funded by DST. He is Honorary Fellow of Zoological Society of India. For his contribution to academics, he is awarded International Best Teacher Award by Southwest Nepal in 2017. He has also received Educational Icon Award 2019 by Technoclass Lab and Incubation of IIT Patna for his contribution to academic excellence. Under UGC scheme of mentoring, Paramarsh, he mentored 7 colleges for NAC accreditation. He has also delivered more than 250 talks on NAC assessment and accreditation individually and for RUSA, HRDC across the country. He is also a popular speaker on soft skills, career guidance, motivation, leadership, and excellence in higher education. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I invite Mr. Srihari Pingle to take over the session. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Respected Principal of the college, Dr. S. Padmavati Madam, Vice Principal, Dr. Rukmini Ma'am, Coordinator IQAC, Ms. N.M. Kavitha Ma'am, Ms. K. Suma Ma'am, Dr. Anita Hindu, conveners, dear participants, and my senior friend from IQAC cluster, Professor Gauri Devasthal Madam. It gives me pleasure to be with all of you and interact on the sixth criterion as far as NAC quality manual is concerned. We'll be talking about governance, leadership, and management. Compared to other criteria, you would say that this is probably not a criterion which focuses on the activities pertaining to all the teachers and the staff directly. Nevertheless, it definitely is a criterion which revolves, or in fact, all the activities of the institution revolve around this particular criterion. And therefore, I would say that if you really want to govern your institution well, you should work more on this particular criterion so that rest of the things, they automatically happen. And for that matter, I felt that this criterion would be of immense importance. So let us begin and start talking about this particular criterion with a quick glance on how the weightage has been distributed. Though the weightage to this criterion, it looks only of 100 marks, it is a weightage, and it has a distribution where you have 10 qualitative questions and 6 quantitative questions distributed amongst 5 areas which we'll call as key indicators. And those 5 key indicators are institutional vision and leadership, strategy development and deployment, faculty empowerment strategies, financial management and resource mobilization, and lastly, and very important, internal quality assurance system. So as I said, these are probably the things, if they are worked well, rest of the things, whether it is research, whether it is teaching learning, whether it is extension, whether it is values, they will fall in place for your institution if your planning is well. And that planning is taking place from this particular criterion, or I would say that planning is taking place in governance, leadership, and management. So how active, how effective, and how efficient is your governance, leadership, and management, that will decide the overall functioning of the institution. If either of them are failing, then that will be reflected in all other criteria. So the first key indicator is institutional vision and leadership. Now it has got a comparatively small weightage of 10. There are no quantitative questions as such. You have 2 descriptive questions. And what do they expect from these questions? The first question asks you about the governance of the institution and whether this governance of the institution is reflective of an effective leadership. See, governance and leadership or effective leaderships are 2 different things. Governance is how do you carry out the activities, or how do you coordinate the activities of your institution. But at that time, you should also ensure that your leadership is effective. And what do you really understand from being effective in your leadership is, the example is very, very simple. There are 2 kinds of people we see who supersede you. One you call as boss and another whom you call as leader. You do not want boss. You always are looking forward to somebody who would lead you. For example, a boss will probably order you that Mr. Pingle, go and do this. But a leader would say that Mr. Pingle, let us do it together. a leader leads by example. So your governance should be complemented with a leadership rather than bossing. But all that is again reflected into your vision and mission. When you are complementing, that means your governance is complementing the leadership. You are moving towards a common path leading to a common vision and mission. And therefore, for any institution, it is very important to have a clear idea about their vision and mission. But I would say, I've seen so many institutions now, I still feel that whatever the vision statement or mission statements are written, people are still unaware of what their mission and vision should be. The first thing, even when you are talking about outcome-based education also starts from vision and mission. From vision and mission to graduate attributes, from graduate attributes to program outcomes, from program outcomes to program specific and then course outcomes. So if you do not have a clear idea about your vision and mission, even your program outcomes and PSOs and COs will not fall in place. So is with any other activities. So let us try to understand what vision and mission are all about. Now, mission is a big dream that an institution is looking after, looking forward to. It has to be a small statement. It has to be a small statement. So vision statement is focusing on tomorrow as to what an organization wants to ultimately become. So it's a long journey that you are talking about. Or here you can see in this graphic, vision statement is where you aspire to be once you have achieved your mission. So vision is probably that last part of your journey, but during your journey, you will probably come across many steps, many stations, and those many steps, many milestones are the mission, your small missions. So many missions coming together will make a big dream, that is vision. So mission statement is something that is focusing on today. I have a big dream, but then what do I do today to make sure that I reach up to that dream, or I implement that dream, or I bring that dream to reality. I'll give you an example, and that example this time is coming from Ramanujan College, which is a famous college in University of Delhi. Now the vision statement of Ramanujan College is discover, empower, transform, building a better world. So see, this is a very small and crisp statement that Ramanujan College in Delhi is making, that they are interested in building a better world, and building a better world via discovering, empowering, and transforming their stakeholders, of course. So that stakeholdership word is in quote unquote, or in the brackets you would say. Now the question is, this is something which they would probably continue to do in coming 20 years, 25 years, 50 years, or a century, maybe 100 years. They'll keep discovering, they'll keep transforming to ensure that they are building a better world, their contribution towards making a better, this world a better place. But the question is, how would they do this? What are the steps for making this dream a reality? So they have got some 8 steps. They will empower the students and teachers. So see, what was reflected in their vision, empowering, is again correlated in the mission statement. How would they empower? So they said they will empower the students and the teachers with the resources of knowledge creation and make them self-reliant. So the responsibility of Ramanujan College Delhi now is to provide the resources of knowledge creation so that they can empower their students and teachers. If you go on reading now, they want to groom the teachers to be leading academicians and excellent researchers. So from a layman, from an incumbent who is just inducted into the institution or into the college, they want to groom their teachers. Teachers, they come into institution with a belief that they are finally teacher and they will do whatever they decide to because they are probably the most learned people in the institution. But then when we join, we realize that we have to go through orientations, through refreshers, courses, through FDPs. Why? Because you need further grooming. So Ramanujan College believes that whatever teachers they are having, whether they are PhDs, whether they are DLED, they still want to groom their teachers so that they become the leading academicians. So we have thousands and lakhs of teachers in higher education institutions, but probably Ramanujan College thinks about the best of them, making the world a better place, building a better world, right? So there is a clear reflection of the vision into the mission statement. So these are the mission, these are the steps, these are the milestones which Ramanujan College will gradually achieve while moving towards their vision. The point I'm trying to make is there has to be clear correlation between the mission, vision and mission, not only vision and mission, but between the activities that you are carrying out in the institution and the vision and mission you have drafted. So there is no point if Ramanujan College is mentioning these vision and mission, but not carrying out these activities in your institution. And therefore, when you go back to this particular question, they say that your governance is reflective of an effective leadership in tune with vision and mission. So your leadership is going parallelly with vision and mission, and your activities, that means governance, should go parallelly with the leadership, vision and mission at the same time. So if I say that I'll empower the students and teachers with resources of knowledge, I'll have to create the resources of knowledge. If I say that I want to equip the students with mature mind and heart capable of critical thinking, innovation, experimentation, so I have to make sure that I carry out such activity in the laboratories or in the classes where the students are provoked or incubated or encouraged to go for innovation, critical thinking, and experimentation. So if that is happening, you are moving on the right track. So then we have to think that what is the vision and mission of our institution, for that matter, maybe Shasun Jain College for Women today, or the people who have joined from other colleges, and are we working towards that? So that matter, you will have to probably keep revisiting your mission specifically, that are we really going in that direction? Or sometime if you feel that you have not really drafted your vision statement well, then probably you need to redraft your vision statement as well. All your stakeholders should be aware of these vision and mission statements. So provide due space to these vision and mission statements on the walls of your institution, the buildings, college magazine, premises, etc. And make a perspective plan. We'll be talking about strategic and perspective planning in the next question. Your perspective plan, your activities that you have planned, they should also reflect the vision and mission. Next question, it talks about effective leadership again. Now your effective leadership, your leadership should be visible in the institutional practices. And one of the simplest way of making your leadership effective is, sometimes leaders, they prefer to work in isolation, that I will do everything alone so that I'll get the whole credit of the success. But you cannot. Leadership is a teamwork. So whether it is Virat Kohli or Rohit Sharma, whether it is Narendra Modi ji, or whether it is Chief Minister of our state, he has to work with his team. So leadership is all about team. And when you are talking about team, you have to handle the responsibilities to your teammates, but at the same time, provide them enough freedom to take their decision. So two things come into play. One is called as decentralization. That means distributing your responsibilities. And once you distribute your responsibilities, allow them to take their decisions, allow them to have their say. That is called as participative management. So rights are also distributed. When you distribute the jobs, when you distribute the duties, the rights are also distributed. You cannot keep all rights with yourself so that everybody is coming to you all the time for signing, and then we are cribbing that why are you coming to me every time? So they are coming to you every time because you have not given them enough right. So that is what we mean by decentralization and participative management. Another way of looking at decentralization is, now you can see here, this probably the round circle that you see here, the red circle that you see here is the leader. Now he has distributed his workload across the people, but that distribution is not in a planned way. There is no hierarchy, and therefore this kind of approach is not decentralization, where each of these people are finally reporting the leader. But in the other case, you see here, this leader has handed over his responsibility to 2 or 3 or 5 subordinates. And those subordinates have further distributed to responsibilities to people who are subordinate to them further. So that I would not say there that these subordinates are reporting to the superseding authority, but these people are working together, helping their seniors to, finally conclude the job, finally come to consensus, finally leading to the quality. So that is what we mean by decentralization. And in institution, you probably can have principal, like in your case, Dr. Padmavati is heading the institution, but then you also have Dr. Rukmini, who is the vice principal. So in case Dr. Padmavati is not there, Dr. Rukmini is having equal authorities to take some decision with consultation with the principal. Then you have IQAC coordinator, Ms. Kavitha ma'am, who also has suggestions to offer. And her suggestions are given due credit by the principals, vice principals, and the people from management, for example, respected Jain Sahab and respected Mehta Sahab. That is called as participative management, where head of the departments also have a say. You take meetings, your head of the departments put their suggestions, you listen to them, and all those good suggestions are taken up and are implemented. So what are those activities where you are carrying out the decentralization and participative management? There are many. For example, the IQAC itself is a wonderful example of participative management, where you have management representatives, the principals, the teaching employee, the student representative, the representatives from the staff, and you are allowing all of them to offer their suggestions. Then you further distribute your work: criterion 1 coordinator, criterion 2 coordinator, criterion 3 coordinator, and so on. They are further having their members and so on. Sometimes in the admission committee, we see that principals or the vice principal of the respective faculty are the in charges of the admission committee. Then the admission committee of a particular faculty is headed by a coordinator for a particular class, for example, first year, second year, or third year. Then he is having members who are supporting him. Then there are clerks and class 4 employees who are checking the forms and signing them or sending the students to some admission counter or the fee counter, etc. Examination committees are another example, where probably you have principal who is heading the committee. Then you have a chief college examination officer, CEO, or college officer for examination, COE, whatever you want to call it. Then you might have senior supervisors, junior supervisors. Then again, you might have some peons who would be helping you in the conduct of examinations, right? So the distribution of responsibilities is there, and rights are also distributed. So when the junior supervisor is in the class while the conduct of examination is going on, you do not go to the principal for signing that report. The junior supervisor signs it. Therefore, when you decentralize, you also distribute the rights with the duties. So what are such activities that you are carrying out in your institution? An easy question to write down, and that is happening in most of the institutions, so no worries about that. Now, as far as planning is concerned in an institution, this becomes a very important part. Key indicator number 2, strategy development and deployment. Now, let us ponder upon these two words: strategy development and deployment. Two things. You can develop a strategy, no problem. Now, developing a strategy is also a big exercise. But the deployment of strategy is also implement. You can have a number of plans. No, I want to do this, I want to do that, I will do this in this year. But have you actually implemented that is another thing. So planning and strategy are two things which go together. You can plan, but for a plan to work, you need to have a strategy. I'll give a simple example. I plan to win a World Cup, T20 World Cup, which recently happened. But then I sit down together with the 11 people or 15 people I had chose to be in the team. And then I look at what matches I have to play ahead. I have to play with Pakistan, I have to play with New Zealand, I have to play with Scotland, I have to play with Namibia, and so on, or Afghanistan for that matter. This was these were the matches that India had to play in the Cricket World Cup recently. So when I sit and think about who is my first opponent, Pakistan. Then I think about the 11 players that Pakistan might be playing. How are their bowlers? What that bowler would be doing? Will it be in swing? Will it be out swing? And so on. And accordingly, I decide who should be the opener, which player should I play, who should be my bowler, what should be my fielding strategy. So I plan to win the World Cup, all right. But then how would I go match by match, over by over, ball by ball? That is strategy. So strategy is something that takes you to the implementation of planning, and therefore having plans merely is not enough. So the first question is, what is the institutional strategic or perspective plan? Whether it is deployed, effectively deployed, and then if it is effectively deployed in the institution, effectively placed, effectively implemented, then give the details of one successful activity based on the strategic plan and upload those documents on the website. So how would you make a plan for a particular activity? Say, for example, you plan to improve the research output in your institution. That is my plan. So you can just write down in your IQAC notebook or minutes of the proceeding of the minutes and say that it was decided in the IQAC minute to strengthen the research output in the institution. This is just a plan, and it probably will never happen unless and until you strategize it. What will be the step to improve the research in your institution? So first thing that you do is a baseline assessment. Where are you and where do you want to reach? So if I do a baseline assessment and I say that there are 20 departments in my institution, and out of the 20 departments, some 10 departments are doing wonderful research, 5 departments are doing average research, and there are another 5 departments that they are not doing any kind of research, then probably your focus will be, the first focus will be on those 5 departments which are not doing anything, and encourage the remaining 5 departments which are doing research, but they want to really, a good push. So maybe you will institute some kind of fellowship, some kind of awards, etc. to promote it. So your strategy is decided by your baseline assessment. That is first thing. After doing your baseline assessment, you decide what do you want to achieve. Maybe you will realize that you do not have patent. Maybe you will realize you have publications, but those publications are not having good metrics like H-index or citations. So you will try to improve upon it. So your visioning can only be done after a baseline assessment. And that is where your academic and administrative audits, they help. If you are carrying out your audits regularly, they will keep you aware about your performance in various aspects of the higher education and the quality that matters. So once you have done your baseline assessment and visioning, you now can have a strategy. That what do you want to do? So you would say that I would probably increase the number of publications twofold, having citations in Scopus and Web of Science and Indian Citation Index. If that is your strategy, then you further do action planning. What do I do for you? People don't know where to find citation in Web of Science. People don't know if they want to find citation in Scopus. What is Indian Citation Index only? So make them aware of it. Action planning, what will you do? Allow them to write down good fund proposals so that they can fetch the fund for research grants. Then they can start working on it. Ask the teachers to apply for research projects. Make some avenues for example, encouraging them by awards, etc. So that can be a part of your action planning, and then implement it. And once you have implemented it, again check whether the things are going on the right track or not. That is monitoring and evaluation, which is very important. And if it is not still working, then go back again and revise your action plan. So this is how your strategic and perspective plan, they work together. You can plan anything, but if you do not strategize it, it is going to be difficult. So the major difference between the strategy and plan is, planning is more about what are you going to do, how much money this will require, Who will be the people responsible for it? So it starts with vision, mission, work distribution among the people, finances required, etc., etc. That is planning. Crude meaning of planning. So it talks about timelines. 2 साल में करना है. You want to do it in 2 years. Deliverables, what is required, what is the budget, who will be responsible. That is planning. So right hand side graphic, it tells you about planning. But when you are talking about strategy, you are talking about the ways you want to find to win. So strategy is the act of making an integrated set of choices which positions the organization to win. What are my winning aspirations? Where do I want to play? I mean, what are those areas where I want to work? How to win? Whether I have capabilities or not? What are the management systems? Do I have those management systems, or do I want to create those management systems where I will finally lead to win? So I want to create a win-win situation. That is strategy. How would I play? How would I work so that I finally can achieve the target? So plan is more like setting the target, and strategy is more like how to achieve the target. I hope you might have understood this. Now, when you're talking about plans and strategies, you have to be very, very critical about this, which we all already know. Setting smart goals. Writing vague statements as your plans are never going to work. Say, for example, I want to strengthen research in my institute. It is not going to strengthen just by writing, I want to strengthen research in my institute. As I said, you have to be very, very specific. I want to double the number of international publications in my institute in next 5 years. That sounds realistic, right? So whatever you are saying, what are you planning? Is it specific? Can you measure it? Double the publications. But whether it is attainable, can your teachers really double their publications in coming 5 years? Is it realistic? Is it going to happen? And then whether it is time bound, as I said, in 5 years, in 2 years, this year, 6 months, 1 month, and so on. This week. So deadlines are very, very important. That is a part of plan. That is part of planning. So your plans should be smart. And along with any plan, whether it is perspective or strategic plan, there's something which is again needed, that is action taken report, ATR. And that is why in that flow sheet that I was telling you, I said that finally you come down to monitoring and review. You might have planned something for next 5 years, but during 5 years period, maybe in the 3rd year, 4th year, or maybe after 5 years, you go back and see, have you implemented what you had planned? And did you get what you had planned to achieve? Writing it is called as action taken report. So you write it could be achieved, you write it could not be achieved, and mention the reason why your plan could not be implemented or the success could not be achieved. The reason for the failure. That is called as action taken report. So your perspective plan will always mention the plan that you are having, the strategy that you might be having. 3rd column will be having the deadline, and finally you will have the action taken on it with signature of the authority. Upload this on your institutional website, and your case for this particular question, that is 621, is settled. 6.2.2 is a comparatively very, very easy question, because we, the higher education institutions, have been doing it for long. But finally, you have to write it and be sure that what you write is actually happening in your institutions. So this question says that the functioning of the institutional bodies. Now you have many administrative and non-administrative bodies in your institution. So for example, college development committee, governing council, or for that matter, many more, right? Academic council, board of studies, etc. if you're an autonomous college. So whatever bodies you are having, are these bodies governed by the policies, procedures, service rules regarding the appointments or the administrative setups? And so if you are having such kind of implementation or the functioning of your bodies, then that can be reflected through a graphic that we call as organogram. So organogram is nothing but a chart that shows the structure of the organization, their relationships and relative ranks. So we all know this, how an organogram look like. Your institution might be headed by the board of trustees, then the principal, then the vice principal, then the head of the department, then the teachers. You might also be having an office superintendent or the registrar in your institution, librarian, and then followed by the non-teaching employee, etc. And an IQAC, which is in constant communication with the management also, and with the principals and the vice principals also. So who is reporting to whom and how they are interacting with each other, the relative graphic is called as organogram. But along with this organogram, as has been already mentioned in the question, come many other things. For example, the policies and the procedures and the rules, etc., which I am sure Professor Kangude might have discussed in while discussing criterion 4, because I know he's very, very fond of policies and procedures. I'll also show you one of such format where you can, which you can use probably to write down your policies and procedures also. So you have a principal who has been given a set of responsibilities. The duties of the principal are governed by certain rules set by your state government, higher education department, MHRD, UGC, etc., your university also. Same happens with the vice principals. There are statutes, there are ordinances, etc., head of the departments and the teachers, of course. So if you go to UGC regulation 2018, you would find what are the teachers' responsibility, what are the students' responsibility. If you go through the report of Professor Yashpal 1949, I guess, which talks about the code of conduct or code of professional ethics for teachers in higher education institution. So it talks about what a teacher is expected to do in the institution and what a teacher should not do ethically in the institution, right? So we have so many things. We have service rules which have been decided again by your state governments, etc. So what is expected for you is to upload a such similar kind of organogram on your institutional website, number one. And number two, clearly make aware available the rules, regulations, responsibilities, etc. to the staff concerned. I should be aware of my responsibilities. So a non-teaching staff should also be. Coming to next question, that is 623. We are talking about implementation of e-governance in areas of operation, which are mentioned below. Now, in this era, specifically after COVID pandemic, I would say specifically during COVID pandemic, we have all realized there is a dire need of all of us to, incorporate ICT into our day-to-day functioning. So when governance is taken care by electronic devices, we call it as e-governance. When the e-governance is at the center, the focus is on the e-governance, that all your processes, how you communicate with people, what are the resources available to you, what technology that you use, they all focus on the e-governance. And in this particular case, we have 4 areas to focus upon. Your administration should be governed electronically. Your finances and accounts should be governed electronically. Your student admission and support processes should be governed electronically, and so should be examination. For that matter, you have under number of, you would say, software companies who are willing to offer ERP solutions to you at a cost of 6 lakh rupees, 7 lakh, depending upon what they're offering, 10 lakh, 2 lakh, whatever it may be. Or maybe you can ask your computer science department teachers and students to design a software for your institution where administrative activities such as, I want to take leave, casual leave, but then instead of writing those leave letters, can I submit an application electronically, which is sanctioned by head of the department and the principal as well. Or there are many administrative activities such as budgeting, etc., under the finance and accounts section, opening balance and closing balance of the finance that can be seen, right? Audits, etc. Then student admission, can they go online? Many of the institutions are implementing them. Scholarships, LCTC bona fide issue to the students, examination, hall ticket generation, timetables, blocks, etc. Examination form filling. Most of the colleges now they are having these things done online electronically, offline through LANs or FTP servers. So if you are having all of these, you will get it in package mostly. So only thing that you have to do is implement this and mention the name of the vendor from where you have purchased it and the year of implementation from where you have started, along with the contact details of the vendors. So what softwares? I think you should not be using separate softwares for that. If you get them in the bundle, that would be okay. Now, since this is a quantitative question that will be evaluated by data verification and validation, that is DVV third party, you would require to upload the evidences during your SSR upload. And what are you going to upload for that matter? You will upload the screenshots of the ERP that you are using in different modules. So a module of administration, take a screenshot. Module of finance and account, a screenshot. Student admission support, examination, screenshots. And then upload them along with the bills that you might be paying to the vendor. And you also need to have a policy document on e-governance. What are your policies? Where are the avenues where you want to implement e-governance? And what if it goes wrong? Who are the people who are responsible for it? So this is how policies are addressed. We will talk about policies later on in between this presentation only. So then we come down to 6.3, which is the next key indicator in this particular criterion, and we call it as faculty empowerment strategies. Now, this has comparatively higher weightage. And while addressing Ramanujan College's vision and mission, we were talking about how you want to train your faculties, right? We are personnel who keep learning. See, you thought that you know everything, and when the pandemic came, many of us started learning Google Meet, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc. So learning never stops. In fact, if you look at the graduate attributes given by UGC in LOCF, the 15th graduate attribute that is mentioned is lifelong learning. Learning never stops. And therefore, you have to ensure that you empower faculty through faculty empowerment programs and their welfare so as to create a win-win situation. See, when your employees are happy, then your institution also becomes a happy place to work. Otherwise, your teacher are always, dying to go off the campus and be at their home at ease, right? So this has got a weightage of 30 marks. There are 5 questions, 2 are qualitative, but here now 3 questions are quantitative. So you see more emphasis on quantitative questions here. The first question, again, comparatively is easy. What are the welfare measures that you are offering to your teaching and non-teaching staff? What do you mean by welfare measures? Welfare measures are the means to improve the job performance. See, I am working in an institution in IQS as IQSC coordinator. Now, as I guess Dr. Anita Hindu mentioned, that I have been serving as IQSC coordinator for 11 years now. And by the next cycle, that is 4th cycle of institution, I'll finish 15 years if I continue to work as IQSC coordinator. But then I need a constant encouragement from my superseding authorities, maybe the principal or the management, so that I still manage to have that energy to work for 4 more years. And where is that energy coming from? That energy is coming from the welfare, whether intramural or extramural, some social security schemes. I feel comfortable here. The working environment that I get here, that is creating an impact on the job performance that I might be showing. So what are those things that you are offering to your teaching and non-teaching staff? Do you provide them enough space to recreate? Can they sit down at some place and play something? For example, in our gymkhana, we go in the evening and play table tennis. I take a walk around the 8-lane track that we have. I walk 6 kilometers every day these days in the ground, along with my vice principal and 4 or 5 more teachers. Do your institutions, they provide health insurance? which is of course in case of aided teacher might be compulsory, but if you have temporary teachers or non-grant teachers, unaided teachers, can you arrange that health insurance? In our institution, for that matter, what we do is, to the wards of non-teaching employee, we offer a concession of 50%. Can we do something like that so that they can be encouraged to take up higher education, at least in case of the wards of non-teaching employee? Can we have a credit cooperative society where we can borrow some amount, take loans, so that we are in a situation to buy our homes, construct our homes, buy our vehicles? Most of the teachers or the staff members in our college, they have flourished like anything because they had that a buffer of a staff credit society. We have a mechanism of urgent loan also. So if you want some amount immediately, paperwork will happen. You take this amount first and then get your things done. So some small amount is handed over. Workplace safety. How about the working environment? If my working environment is safe, I can work till 7 in the evening, sometimes 8 in the evening. If I'm not concerned about, oh, I need to work alone in the dark in this huge campus. We have a 50-acre campus. All right. But then I feel comfortable here, right? So workplace safety with a security personnel, with CCTV camera around. And since this is known as a good institution, nobody is going to come and breach the security. Sanitation. So there are many such things. Can you, for example, in my institution, we take a excursion of non-teaching staff every year after the Diwali vacation. So once in a year, they deserve this vacation where they can go out and enjoy with their fellow people. And after that, they come again and start working efficiently because now they had a wonderful time. So what are the various welfare measures that you have to jot down in 500 words? Now this one, 632, is a quantitative question where you are asked about the average percentage of teachers who are provided with financial support to attend conferences. Yes, what a coincidence. I was reading in the chat Vijaya Agrawal's question, and she is asking, their college is having a CPE level 2 status. Under that, we are eligible to use the grant in faculty development. Can the faculty get remuneration for attending the conference, workshop, and seminars, etc.? Dr. Vijaya Agrawal, I would not say it is a remuneration. It is a reimbursement of what they have spent on, registration fees. And so that question, the question that I am addressing right now is with regards to that only. And the answer to your question is yes. So you can take up all those reimbursements that you are making to the teachers and take them in 6.3.2, of course, supported by your CPE fund. So that is no harm. So how many teachers have actually attended some conferences and workshops or have taken the memberships, whether annual or life memberships of professional bodies, and you have reimbursed their registration fee or the membership fee? Now the question is, why do you want to do it? Now, if some teacher is genuinely attending a conference or a workshop to enhance his or her abilities, and he wants to then further train the trainers, see, you need to have a clear focus. This is what vision is. Now, I have gone to RBPT workshops, research-based pedagogical tools workshops under DBT STAR scheme. So the idea of that workshop is, if I go and learn RBPT in one of the workshop, I should come back and teach my fellow teachers on. So in case I'm doing it, then my registration fee for the workshop should be reimbursed because I'm willing to further percolate this to my fellow teachers. If I go to some workshop and learn some advanced techniques such as HPLC or PCR or ELISA or whatever, I'm talking about some biological techniques. Or maybe in case of commerce people, maybe I learn some new thing that is coming up. And I come and then teach my fellow teachers. My fee, can this registration fee be reimbursed by the people from my institution or the administration from my institution? Same with professional bodies membership. Now, Dr. Anita Indu was talking about me being the honorary fellow of Zoological Association of India. But I have also life membership of that Zoological Society of India. All right. But being a member of Zoological Society of India, I might be learning some things. And when I'm learning few things of zoology from that society, do I percolate them to my fellow junior teachers? And if I'm doing it, my institution is getting benefited. And therefore, this whole idea of reimbursing the fee for registration of conferences, workshops, or the membership fee of the professional body. So you should in fact have a budget allocation where you can do it. In case of Dr. Vijaya, where she was talking about that particular question, she has a CPE grant, so of course she can have a budget earmarked for that only. If you are having what was the name of the conference or what was the professional body for which the membership fee was reimbursed, how much amount was reimbursed. Now, again, the policies and procedures come into play. For example, in my institution, such support will be provided to a teacher only once during the year. So if I keep on attending 5 conferences, I will not reimburse it for all the conferences. I will support it once only. But the condition is provided the teacher has presented a paper in the conference, number 1. And if he has attended a workshop, he'll come back and organize a similar workshop in the institution. Then his fee will be reimbursed. So that is a policy that we have drafted. Can you draft a similar policy? What amount will be reimbursed? When it will be reimbursed? How many times it will be reimbursed? And according to that policy, then you can have a policy document, as I said, e-copy of the letters. So for example, if I am getting reimbursement, Dr. Anitam was also mentioning that I got an award at Nepal. So I had gone to Nepal and my Samstha, my organization has reimbursed rupees 10,000. They had awarded me rupees 10,000 for winning that award and presenting a paper at Nepal. So this is how you can do it. For that, you will of course need a letter which has been handed over to me or audited statement also highlighting the financial support that has been given to the teachers. Now, we were constantly talking about those policies. Yeah, unfortunately, Vijaya madam, your institution has not used the grant that way. That is your internal matter. Then, of course, it will not fall here and the grant might go back unspent. And that is not a good sign, actually. So this is how your policies and procedures may look like. The head, the header which mentions the title of the institution, the logo, the title of the policy or the procedure that you are writing. So financial support to staff, policy number. So academic policy number APN, the year in which the policy was drafted, the number, the version, the effective date when this policy was started. Who is the administrator responsible? So for example, principal is responsible here. Who is superseding authority to the principal? The governing council, drafted by IQAC, approved by IQAC and academic council. What are the references? The versions that they will, revision that they will come up. So 1.1, then 1.1 will come here, 1.2 will come here and so on. So this is a template that you might have for drafting a policy. It further goes, you have a policy statement, then you have definitions, that you have procedures, and finally the format for the records that may be generated. So this is how the policy goes. Then we come down to 633, where we are talking about average number of professional development or administrative training programs organized by the institution for teaching and non-teaching staff during the last 5 years. Now, this again is very, very important. You need to understand the needs of your staff. You just cannot crib about or talk about their poor performance without understanding their needs. If you really want to increase the working efficiency of your staff, you will need to educate them, train them, empower them, and reward them. And one of the ways of doing that is organizing professional development and training development programs. But then the question comes, what are those training programs? Do I, just wake up one morning and say that I want to organize a program on administrative functioning, or I want to program on ICT, use of effective use of ICT tools in administration? What programs, professional development programs or workshops you want to organize it depends upon the assessment that we call as training needs assessment. What are the directives? For example, who is directing you? Your university is directing you, MHRD is directing you, HRDCs are directing you, IQAC or NAC is directing you. So requirements are governed by the directives that you are getting from various authorities. The requirement of the training is also governed by what your mission, what do you want to say? For example, we were talking about research. I want to do research. I want to strengthen research in my institute. So since you want to improve research in your institute, then one of your training programs is probably research. What are the roles and responsibilities? If there is one steno in your institution who has been emailing in Tamil, but he is not aware of English, then probably you need to train him in how to translate a document from Tamil to English. Then you may probably organize a training program for all your non-teaching staffs in Google translation from English to Tamil and from Tamil to English. So your roles and responsibilities decide what training program. Then recommendations and observations. Your peer team came, NAC peer team, and they mentioned that the placements and competitive examination department performance is not satisfactory. You want to improve on placements. Then you probably train the teachers into how to make or collect a data of the students and their qualification for communication to the employers or to the campus placement interview cell, etc. Your feedback decides if the students, for example, feedback is not only from students. If there is a feedback regarding certain teacher that the blackboard work of the teacher is not significantly good enough, or if the teacher is not using any tools or ICT based tools in the class, then probably you feel that I need to organize a training program on various teaching and learning methods that a teacher can use in the class. So all these things decide and give you an idea of what training programs. So your training program that you are organizing or professional development program that you are organizing is not coming out of the blue. It is coming out of a thought process, feedback, recommendations, roles and responsibility, missions and directives. And then you organize such programs which will not include seminars and invited talks. So whatever seminars you are conducting, one day seminar on this and that will not be included. Guest lectures will not be included. A workshop means where teachers or your non-teaching staff are allowed to actually do the things. So if I'm organizing a workshop on translating through Google Translation, then let them give them a paragraph in Tamil and allow them to translate it into English. Give them a paragraph in English, allow to translate into Tamil and so on. So what is the list of such programs that you have? So the role of IQAC becomes very, very important here. Make a list of these programs that you have organized. Keep brochures and reports of these programs intact, along with geotagged photographs if possible for you. List of the participants, caption the photographs, and annual report, which probably can be AQR, is good enough to support your case. Then another question, these are the programs that you are organizing, but at the same time, your teachers are going for these online or face-to-face faculty development programs, including the orientation courses, induction program, refresher courses, STP, etc. So keep a record of all these things. What are those teachers who have attended the orientation, the refresher, face-to-face online programs, and what was the duration? The only document that you simply need is the certificate that is awarded by UGC, HRDC, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya scheme for teachers, etc., etc. But all these programs, they should be of at least 1 week duration. Attending seminars or invited talk will not be considered here. And if a teacher has attended 7 professional development programs, then the teacher will be counted once only. Right? So he has attended 8 programs, 10 programs, he'll be counted once only. And the rule is that whatever program the people have attended, it should be as per the UGC or AICTE rules. So a refresher course, 14 days, orientation programs, then FDP is at least, it is counted as 5 days. So 7 days program we call it. So it has to be as per the durations laid down by UGC and AICTE. So usually any UGC program, HRDC program, or program under Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya scheme, those all are included here. E-copy of certificate will be required. Now, performance appraisal system, the next question is again simple thing that might be happening in all of the institutions which probably people here are joining from. But the problem usually, say for example, we all are aided teachers. So we are governed by the rules of promotions, career advancement scheme given by UGC. So UGC has laid down some API and PBS stuff, and accordingly we have criterion for teaching, for extracurricular and co-curricular activities and the research, etc. So we go from level 10 to 11 to 12, 12, 13A and 14, etc., etc. That's all right. How about the temporary staff members in your institutions? Have you laid down some guidelines for their performance appraisal? Performance appraisal is, this phrase is made up of two words. One is performance and another is appraisal. Appraisal means hike in salary, increment in your designation also, but that should be based on performance and good performance. And when is that coming from? When you are providing performance appraisal, you are offering feedback to your employee whether they are doing good or bad. You are providing validation to the selection process that yes, this guy is doing good. That means my selection process was good. I have selected a correct employee for my institution. If the employee is not doing good, then you come to know about their training needs. Where this employee is lacking, what do I need to train him so that he can improve? If you are giving a hike in salary or promoting him, it motivates the employee. This helps in promotion or demotion. So performance appraisal, sometimes it can lead to demotion. You are not performing well, then your salary is deducted or you're discontinued. But of course, that can happen in unaided section of our faculty members or non-teaching employee. So that way, performance appraisal is very, very important. And this should focus on quantity, quality, reliability, and cooperation. So can you incorporate the questions which address all these things? Whether the candidate or the staff employee is able to perform the task in a qualitative manner. What was his understanding? Was he able to solve the problems? Could he innovate? Was he adaptive? Was he systematic in his functioning? What were the initiatives he or she has taken? Whether the employee is accurate, punctual, is he or she having perseverance to the situation? Stability? Is he or she following the rules? Participation in the events? Working together? Courtesy? And then you might be having certain things which are unique to your institution. For example, in my institution, we give utmost importance to two things. One is student research and another is feedback. So in any interview where the teacher has to be continued for next year or not, we ask him, what was your feedback by the student last year? And number two, how many students' research projects have you guided? Two very important things. Student research has huge focus in our institution. We have had around 3,000 student research projects in last 9 years with around 90 publications in international research journals by students and one patent to their name. So it has immense importance in our institution. So what do you feel is important in your institution? You can incorporate such qualitative and quantitative parameters in your performance appraisal system and ask those teachers and non-teaching staff to fill their own self-appraisal form and get that validated from IQAC to ensure that they are continued, discontinued, or their salary hike is ensured. Write the whole process and get the marks. And when the peer team comes, you can show that data which is verified by the IQAC and the principal. That's the only way to do it. We are coming to penultimate key indicator, and that penalty key indicator is financial management and resource mobilization. Now, as you can see here, this has got two parts. One is financial management and another is resource mobilization. Financial management, as you can see in the graphic which is on the left hand side here, the image on the left hand side, You might be having lakhs of rupees, crores of rupees, billions of rupees, or trillions of rupees. Fine. But then how do you utilize or manage those finances available with you is a skill. And that skill is called as financial management. But there is another important skill for any higher education institution, that is resource mobilization, which probably has become very difficult for affiliated institutions like us, with the cessation in grants that we are seeing from UGC and other agencies. And that is called as resource mobilization. What are the various resources from where I can fetch the grants, where I can fetch the money from? That includes the tuition fee of the students, that includes the salary grants, that includes probably the grants from DBT, DST, CPE, UGC, etc., etc., etc. But what do you need to do for that? That remains to be seen. So a weightage of 20 with 3 questions to be addressed. We'll first talk about whether your institution conducts internal and external financial audits. And if you are conducting those external and internal financial audits, clearly describe the various findings of the internal and external financial audits and mechanism for settling those audit objections which might have been noted down in the audits. So audit is nothing but mechanism to find out whether the things are going as per the laws and the rules. And if they are not going, what are the improvements that can be done in the system? When this specifically focuses on the finances, we call them as financial audit. When they focus on academics and administration, we call them academic and administrative audit. When they focus on gender, we call it as gender audit. When it focuses on environment, we call it as green audit. So as simple as that. We are talking about finances right now. So there are 2 ways to go about it. The internal audit is something which may not be necessarily done by a chartered accountant. Even a commerce teacher in your institution can carry out an audit to see if everything is falling in place or not. Things are going as per the laws in the income tax, TDS, etc. is working out or not. And that audit will keep you on the toes that yes, everything is being tracked. So the only thing is that you do not need a professionally qualified chartered accountant for internal audit. But when you get your books audited by a professional chartered accountant or statutory auditor, then that is called as external audit. Apart from that, another audit that probably might be conducted by your state government AGO office or something like that, right? So this audit, that is external audit, is conducted by a certified chartered accountant and under Companies Act 2013. And internal audit is something that can be conducted by people from your management or even a teacher of your institution. So that does not matter. The only thing that you will have to do is write a draft where you would explain or elaborate the process of how these internal audits are conducted, how the external audits are conducted, what were the observations, if there were any discrepancies, could you settle the audit observations, and how did you settle the audit observation? So this is a routine process which is happening in most of the institutions. So there is no point going in details with that. This is another thing which is asking you about the funds and the grants that your institution might be receiving either from non-government bodies, individuals, philanthropists. Philanthropists are the people who donate you certain amounts. So in the simplest words, we are addressing the donations that your institution might be getting from NGOs, from individuals, from philanthropists. Now, this is decided by the confirmation of the cause for which you are working. The question that might arise is, why would people give you money? We'll discuss this in the next question. Why would people give you money? So many people say that nobody comes to us and donate us 10 lakh, 5 lakh, 2 lakh, even not even 5,000. So how do we answer this question? We'll discuss it later on. But in case, if you have some NGOs or individuals and philanthropists who have donated you certain amount, then what was the name of that non-government agency or those individuals? What was the purpose for grant? For example, one of the person from our society has donated 1 lakh rupees to our institution for the purpose of promoting our students to take part or participate in Maharashtra State Research Convention competition, which is called as Avishkar. That grant has been kept reserved for Avishkar research competition only. I'll tell you about one of such donation which has been given by a famous builder of Pune, Maharashtra, Avinash Bhosle, who has given a donation of rupees 78 lakh to our institution for purpose of scholarship to those students who cannot take admission just because they do not have enough money. So any student on the verge of dropout because of financial constraint is taken care of under this scheme that we have through the donation, and we call this scheme as Vidya Dhan Kalash Yojana. Right? So why people are donating? If you have a good cause, they will always donate to you. And I have told you in the amounting to 78 lakh rupees. So in lakhs, right? So what is the amount? And of course, when you are mentioning, I'm mentioning this live, right? So if I can have the courage to mention this live, that means this amount has gone down into the audited statement. Dr. Anita Indu is asking if the amount is given by own college trust, you cannot mention it here. So not from your sister institutions also. So any amount which has been given by your trust, your sister institutions will not be included here. So going to SOPs, you require audited statements, copy of letter indicating the grants and funds. And as Dr. Anita was asking, funds from own institution, own trust and sister institution will not be considered. Any donation in the form of equipment, software or materials, physical stuff, etc., they will not be counted here. We are talking about funds that are monetary in nature. That means in money, rupees, right? Then we go to 643, and that is a big question. Why are people coming to you and giving you money? Why should any funding agency offer you some money, grants, funds, etc.?
Good day.
And that is
Single wala.
And that is because you have a policy. You have a defined policy and procedure for resource mobilization. So again, we are coming down to policies and procedure. What should be your policy and procedure for resource mobilization? As I have already told you, resource mobilization is all about finding the avenues from where you can fetch money. How that happens? You need to prepare a resource mobilization strategy. Do your SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities in front of you? So if you are aware of your strengths, you will probably use your strengths to fetch the grants. If you are aware of the opportunities, what are the funding agencies that can provide you the grants? You can avail those opportunities. No, Dr. Vijaya Lakshmi, the scholarships are for the students and that are being fetched from the government. So scholarships will not be included. They will be included in the criterion 5 only. So what are the opportunities available to? What are your needs? And accordingly, you will set your target and plan to get the funds from various sources. Now, as I said, why should be people offering you the money? The reason is this third point, which we say organization's cause. Because I'm carrying out student research scheme, that is why somebody came to me and said that I want to donate rupees 1 lakh specifically for those students who are doing research. So that cause was important. Because My vision is spread knowledge unto the last, because I am concerned about my students being financially not able to, pay the fee. And therefore somebody came and raised that amount of 78 lakh rupees under Vidya Dan Kalash Yojana. But they could come to us because we had those connections with the society. They thought that we were capable of utilizing their money in a proper way, because they thought that we were concerned about quality in higher education, and we were concerned about providing services to our students. So the cause why I am doing this, that is very, very important. Now, the important step becomes explore the funding sources. Yesterday, I was interacting with my staff on KQAR 2020, and I emphasized on the importance on exploring various funding sources. You just cannot rely on UGC and university all the time to get the research funds, minor research project, major. Now you will have to find out British Council, ICSSR, and various other funding agencies. Even Reserve Bank of India provides funds to commerce people for carrying out research. There are people who are unmute. Can you please mute them? Yeah, thank you. So exploring funding sources. But when you do that, you still sometimes are not able to fetch the funds. This is because your funds are not good enough. If you think so that even after writing a proposal, you are not getting funds, your proposals are not entertained, then you need to probably collaborate with few people. So under, for example, DST SERB scheme, DST SIR, you are principal investigator, then you get a co-investigator from some other place. Your proposal should be strong. So organize fund proposal writing workshops for your teachers, where you would learn to write a good proposal. For example, DBT STAR scheme. DBT STAR scheme, they take your presentation in front of all the people, panel people sitting, and they thoroughly go through your proposal. If your proposal is good, then only you will be selected for STAR strengthening program. Otherwise, you will be outright rejected. So it is not that lot of money is available and I just want to 10,000 here, 10,000 there, 15,000 there, and I want to just, show the utilization. No. And specifically with this government, the central government that we are having, they will not give you money unless and until you ensure that you are going to do justice with the amount that has been given to you. So your funds, your outputs, your cause, your concern, your capability, and your connections, these are very important. And when you write it down, ensure that you put it in your policies and procedure, you can address this particular question. Coming down to the last key indicator, and that last key indicator is internal quality assurance system. Again, the weightage is on the higher side, 30 marks with 3 questions. One is quantitative, very easy one, and 2 are qualitative stuff. 651 is the question where IQAC's functioning is addressed. IQAC has contributed significantly for institutionalizing the quality assurance strategies and processes. Now, again, there are three things I would say. One is institutionalization. Second is quality assurance. And third is strategies and processes. So you may think, and you may plan so many things. I want to do this as an IQAC coordinator. I want to do that. But things gradually happen in an institution. What are the 2 practices that you had gradually began in your institution, and now in a big picture, you realize that whole institution is implementing it? Whether it is feedback, whether it is teaching plan that you are having, or teaching diary that you are having, whether it is research, whether it is student research for that matter, or anything else. For that, we have to realize that the philosophy of functioning of IQAC for institutionalization revolves around this approach, which we call as PDCA approach. You have to plan certain things. And once you plan them, you have to implement them. And once you have implemented them, you have to check whether you have implemented them correctly or not. And if there are some loopholes, some fault finding has to be done. What has gone wrong, that has to be rectified, and repeat the exercise again. Keep checking. That is the only way of quality sustenance and enhancement. What are your requirements has to be defined first. That is what we were addressing even in the perspective plan. So I want to institutionalize probably one teacher, one research project scheme in my institution. Just an example, because I want to strengthen research in my institution. So I said, I will implement one teacher, one research project scheme in my institution. So I have to define the requirements. Then I do the inspection. How many teachers already have research projects? How many still don't have? And then I also look into measuring the effectiveness. What if I ask all the teachers to do research? Is it going to hamper some of the activities in my institution? Is one enough, or I want to make them take 2 research projects and so on? If I increase the number of research projects, will it hamper the quality of the research project, or will it be a quality-wise good research project? So measure the effectiveness also. Do the analysis once the scheme has been implemented. Is it working well? And report then. And if you see something wrong, try to improve upon it so that you ensure the continuous improvement. This is how quality assurance is ensured through IQAC. So the simplest way of doing, or what we said in the question, that institutionalizing quality assurance strategies in the institution is to start from scratch. As a pilot study, do it in one department or few departments. Go on to do it complete department. Verify whether the things are happening as per the requirement. If they are happening as per the requirement, settle down. Otherwise, take a review, improve it, and implement it again. So for that matter, I will say feedback. When we started long back, I guess in 2011 with the feedback systematically, later on around 2013, we thought that many of the questions were either so open-ended that we were not getting the exact crux from the feedback of the student. So we took help of the Bloom's taxonomy and revised our feedback in 2013. Then by the time 2017 came, we thought that we need to probably reach to more students, and then 2017 we came down to online feedback. But when we came down to online feedback, we started with postgraduate classes of science faculty only. So that is how you start on small scale. Because we found that the students from arts faculty were not good enough in filling up those Google Forms or Microsoft Office forms. Gradually, we trained them, and now we see that all our students are happy filling up those feedback forms in an online mode. So this is how your system evolves, and this is how your processes get institutionalized with a constant mechanism for review. So any 2 processes that your IQAC has carried out, those can be mentioned here. Now this question 6.5.2, it talks about reviews. See, I said that IQAC is one of the most important function is taking the review. So when you are taking a review, the most important thing in an education institution is teaching learning process. The methodologies that you might be using for those teaching learning processes and learning outcomes. And where is that learning outcome reflected? Attainment of POs and COs in criterion 2.6.2. Attainment of learning outcome. So are you carrying out that exercise, whether the IQAC is carrying out that exercise of attainment of learning outcome, PO-CO mapping and PO-CO attainment? If yes, then you can say the things are working. So do you have mechanism in your institution where the IQAC is aware of how many lectures the teacher has planned, how many lectures the teacher has actually conducted, what are the methodologies that the teacher has used for teaching? Whether he is using chalk and talk only. I have seen people during the pandemic who were keeping mobile like this and talking to studio like a video chat and saying that we are doing online classes. Horrible. When you are online, could not you use some animations? Could not you use some PowerPoint presentation? Could not you use some recording stuff? Could not you use some audios? Could not you use some YouTube videos, etc.? There were so many things, right? So teaching learning process is all about using different tools to making the teaching process and learning process effectively, and finally correlating your results with the learning outcomes also. Second thing is, as a IQAC coordinator or as a team of IQAC, it is also important for you to monitor various quality parameters. For example, number of teachers in your institution, number of teachers with PhD, number of publications, number of medals won by the students in cultural and sports activity, number of placements, number of students qualifying in competitive examination, total grants fetched by the institution, amount of donation received by the institution, number of extension activities carried out, number of awards for extension activities, and so on. All the parameters. Are you tracking the performance of the institution on these parameters? And do you track the incremental improvement? And what is the incremental improvement? This is incremental improvement. IQAC is working towards making the things better. If you had 10 publications today, you want to make them 15 tomorrow. If you had 15% students placed this year, you want to make them 30% student placed tomorrow. If you had no awards in extension activity, you want at least one award for extension activities in the next year. So IQAC's approach for monitoring incremental improvement is to ensure that the things are made better for tomorrow. So what can you do for that? You can monitor the lesson plan. For example, in our college, online, every head of the department is submitting a summary of what are the teaching learning activities are taking place in their department. We call it as teaching learning summary. The result analysis is available to IQAC. Even at this point of time, I have the result available for the last year. Feedbacks is something that help in self-reflection, peer observation, and student evaluation. So ensure that IQAC is taking feedback and monitoring all the parameters from time to time, as I have already explained just now, whether it is number of faculty members with PhD, number of teaching staff, student strength, number of books, etc., etc., etc. So this is how IQAC play a pivotal role in monitoring the quality parameters of the institution. Now, one of the quantitative question in this criterion is quality assurance initiative of the institutions include. So these are some of the activities that IQAC is routinely doing. IQAC is doing submission of AQR routinely, and you would be happy if you have noted down the extension in the date of AQR that you have to submit for 2020-21. It has been extended till February. You still have to submit your 1920 AQR by 31st December. So submission of AQR to NAC regularly, collection of feedback, its analysis. Analysis of feedback is very important, and uploading the action taken report on the institutional website. That is first thing that IQAC is expected to do. So evidences, of course, are the AQRs that you have uploaded on institutional website, and feedbacks ATR, action taken report, that also you would upload on your institutional website. Collaborative initiatives that you have taken with other institutions. So this is normally what we do. For example, in Paramarsh, I have collaborated with 7 institutions and helped them to go for NAC accreditation. There are many more institutions through IQAC cluster and through individually that we are collaborating to ensure that they go for qualitative initiatives. For example, academic and administrative audits or gender audits, green audits, etc., etc. NIRF, of course, Shasun College is definitely, Shasun Jain College is already participating in NIRF, and many other participants, they also might be taking part in NIRF. Certification from ISO or NBA is again optional for you. If you want, you should be going for ISO. I personally am a pro for ISO. I definitely like institution going for ISO because ISO inculcates that discipline in you for documenting the things, for arranging the things, for organizing the things. So ISO is something that you should go for. NBA is not meant for all the colleges. So you can, of course, take your call on whether you want to go for point number 4, but any 3 of the above, NIRF definitely you can do, collaboration definitely do. You are mandatory to submit your AQR and take feedback. So one you are going to do. So it's easy to get all those 10 marks by opting this any 3 of the above or all of the above. And then you go down to the documentation. As I said, since this is a quantitative stuff, record of the proceedings of the meetings of IQAC, which you upload on your institutional website, feedback ATR, as I said, activities that you have conducted in collaboration with other institutions for quality parameters, and evidences for NIRF that you normally, NIRF has made it compulsory to upload all the relevant parameters on your institutional website. So that also, in case you have an ISO certificate or NBA certification, then those certificates. So this is how IQAC has a role in quality assurance activities of the institution. So lastly, I will just enumerate, if you're talking about this criterion 6, governance, leadership, and management, what are the areas that you need to focus on? The first thing, of course, is vision and mission. Second thing is perspective and strategic plans. Third thing is minutes or the proceedings of the bodies that you are having. Fourth is case studies of decentralization and participative management. Organogram, ERP for e-governance, welfare measures for the staff, financial audits. All those things highlighted in red are quantitative questions, so you need to be more careful about them. Professional development programs for your staff, evidences of the staff attending the FDP orientation, refresher courses, etc. Staff appraisal, that is performance appraisal. Policy document for resource mobilization. Case studies for institutionalization of IQAC. For example, I had given you the feedback mechanism. Evidences for teaching, learning, and review and incremental improvement. And lastly, another quantitative question, which talks about AQRs and NIRFs and certificates, etc., or feedback analysis and the action taken report thereof. So with this, I have come down to the end of today's presentation. And thank you very much for patiently listening to me. And of course, during the session, some of you had also asked the questions. So if you have any further question, this session is open for discussion. You have my mobile number and email ID on the screen. If I'm not able to answer the question, then you can of course get in touch with me, and I will stop sharing the screen and hand it over to the organizers. Thank you very much. Give me a moment.
Participants, kindly post your questions, if any, to the guest.
Thank you, Dr. Kinari Shah, Dr. V.S. Murali, Kavita ma'am, Savita Thorat madam, and everyone. Yes, Dr. Yadna. Thank you, Dr. Rashin Karman. Thanks to everyone. Apart from that, of course, if you have any questions, you can definitely come forward with those questions. I would love to answer if I can. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think if amongst the participants, IQAC coordinators are there, they would be highly encouraged how they can build a team and sit together and work for the institution. Of course, a lot of onus is with us, the IQAC coordinators. And believe me, it's a wonderful responsibility that we are shouldering. It gets tiresome sometimes, but then yes, it gives a lot of satisfaction.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a wonderful session, sir. Sir, I have a small doubt. Sir, under the in 6.5.3 collaborative quality initiative with other institution, which you told me, sir, in that can we include the faculty exchange program?
Yeah, you can. If you have not included it elsewhere, for example, faculty exchange, you would of course include in collaborations in criterion 3.5 again.
Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you have not included there, you can include it.
Okay, sir. And then international conferences, we are collaborating with some other.
That will do. That will.
We will do.
Yeah.
Okay.
That will be included.
Okay.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session. can you name you were talking about that institution which gave you funds for research for the students, sir. So can you name such type of institutions which are ready to offer grants to the colleges, sir? Hello, can you
Okay.
hear me, sir?
Yeah. Initially, it was really troublesome for me to hear you, but I could make the question. Probably you are asking, I was telling you about various other funding agencies which cannot give you funds for research, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. So I'll share the screen again and will give you an idea of some of the research funding agencies. Let me minimize this screen. Give me a moment. I'll give you a complete list. Let me open another presentation. Probably is in my pen drive, but nevertheless, I have a small list here also. Another big list is probably in my pen drive, but I don't mind. I have a small list here as well with Criterion 3 presentations. Give me some time by the time I open up this presentation.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, I guess you can now see Criterion 3 presentation on your screen. Yeah, some of them for languages, social sciences, and commerce. You can, if you want, you can please take a snapshot of this. And there are many more. I think somebody who has asked me the question, she can, if connect with me on WhatsApp. I have a complete PDF file of various funding agency that also includes Reserve Bank of India, etc. So if you can, ma'am, please connect me on WhatsApp or even through email. Then I will send that list also to you. Will that do?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. In the meanwhile, you can take a snapshot of this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, Prashant Deshpande ji has asked a question in the chat box. Good to see a question. What is the importance of departmental library for NAC? See, I would not say that departmental library is important for NAC because that way NAC has not addressed this question anywhere. It used to be in the earlier methodology. But if you say that departmental libraries importance in teaching learning process, I would say yes. Because the students want a quick way of getting their resource material or teaching learning material, the closest place where they can find out. So you can have a central library, but your zoology department, for example, in a campus like mine, where you have some 50 acres to cover, right? So if a student has to walk some 10 minutes to go to central library and then find books, but if he can find the books in his department only, in say 5 minutes, all molecular biology, biochemistry books there only. So it is always good. So as far as teaching learning method is concerned, departmental libraries are important. For NAC, it does not presently have any weightage to departmental libraries. Any more questions, please? Yeah, so if there are no more questions, shall we wind up?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. We'll wind up with a formal vote of thanks. Gratitude is a currency that we can mint for ourselves and spend without fear of bankruptcy. I feel privileged to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. My sincere gratitude to the management, Principal Dr. S. Padmavati ma'am, Vice Principal Dr. S. Rukmani ma'am, for giving us the opportunity to organize the FDP on NAC criteria. My heartfelt thanks to Mr. Srihari Pingle for delivering a wonderful session on NAC Criteria 6. We were able to acquire a deep insights on the Criteria 6, sir. Thank you so much, sir. My profound thanks to the IQAC coordinator, Dr. N.M. Kavita ma'am, Ms. Suma ma'am, for their continuous motivation and support throughout the session. My sincere gratitude to the conveners of the FDP for their tireless efforts in making the event fruitful, and to the technical team for creating the links for the session. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the participants who have actively participated and patiently listening to the session. Thank you, sir. I request all the participants to kindly fill the feedback form.
Thank you very much. I'll take your leave and see you again. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.